All right, let's dive into this critical thinking thing, shall we? Seems like you guys are really interested in this topic, sent us a whole stack of articles.
It's a good one for sure. Super relevant these days.
Definitely. Feels like everyone's talking about critical thinking. So, we've got this article, Top 20 Critical Thinking Skills Interview Questions and Answers. Kind of a mouthful, but pretty interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, it's cool how they frame it around job interviews, like how to show off your critical thinking skills to a potential employer.
Makes sense. But I bet this stuff is useful even if you're not, actively job hunting.
Oh, absolutely. It's like life skills in disguise. How to think clearly, make better decisions, all that good stuff.
Right, right. So, where do they even start with all this?
Well, the article jumps right into how to tell if an argument is strong or weak. They say a strong argument has to be logically sound.
Hmm.
The premises have got to be valid, supported by evidence, all that.
So, it's not just about having an opinion, it's about being able to back it up.
Exactly. A weak argument might rely on assumptions that haven't been proven, or
Literally.
like logical fallacies. Those tricks of reasoning that can sound convincing, but are actually flawed.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely fallen for those before.
They even give this example where a team was about to make a decision based on a tiny sample size of data, totally not representative.
I've seen that happen in meetings. Everyone gets excited about a couple of data points without looking at the bigger picture.
Totally. And the person who was able to spot that weak argument saved the day, basically, prevented a big mistake.
Wow. So critical thinking can actually prevent disasters.
For sure. And it's interesting. The article talks about how important it is to be able to, like, change your mind, to admit when you were wrong.
Really? That seems kind of counterintuitive. Aren't we supposed to stick to our guns and all that?
It's a misconception that strong critical thinkers are never wrong. It's actually the opposite. You got to be willing to adapt when new evidence comes up. Like they had this example, there's this project. The goal was to make things more efficient, right? The person leading it, they assumed that outdated technology was the problem. Like they needed a tech upgrade.
Makes sense.
But then they actually looked at the data, and it turned out the problem wasn't the tech at all. It was inefficient processes.
Oh, so their initial hunch was totally wrong.
Yeah, and because they were willing to let go of that assumption, they found a way better solution.
That's a good lesson. I know I've clung to ideas even when, everything was pointing in a different direction.
It's tough, but yeah, being able to change your mind is a strength, not a weakness. Okay, ready to shift gears a bit. Another big piece of critical thinking is how we deal with information that goes against our beliefs.
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's so easy to just get defensive when something challenges our worldview.
Totally. The article recommends a more systematic approach. First, you got to check out the source. Is this a credible publication? Is the author legit?
Right, so you're not just taking anyone's word for it.
Exactly. Then you try to put that new information into context. How does it fit with what you already know?
So you're not just blindly accepting it, you're thinking about it critically.
Right. And then the next step is to weigh the evidence. Is this new information backed up by solid data? Does it align with other findings from reliable sources?
Makes sense. So it's like a multi-step process.
Yep. And they give an example of someone who was totally thrown off by a study that challenged everything they thought they knew about their field.
Oh, wow.
But then, after really digging into the research, they realized it was actually really solid.
So they had to change their mind.
Yep. And that's the thing about critical thinking. It's about being open to revising your understanding as you learn more.
I'm already feeling mentally stretched. What else is in this article?
Okay, this one's super important, especially these days. Being able to evaluate the credibility of sources, especially online.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like every day there's a new article claiming to have all the answers. How do we even know what to believe?
They give a few tips. First, you look at the author. Are they qualified to be talking about this stuff? Then check the date. Is the information up to date? And then look at their citations. Are they referencing credible sources?
Right, so you're doing your due diligence.
There's an example of someone researching, I think it was a health issue, and they found all this conflicting information. But by using those steps, they were able to figure out which source was most trustworthy.
It's like having a superpower, being able to navigate all this information overload.
Totally. And it goes hand in hand with another skill,
Yeah.
being able to break down complex problems.
Ooh, that's one I could use some help with. Sometimes I get so overwhelmed by big problems, I don't even know where to start.
The article talks about breaking it down into smaller, manageable chunks, prioritizing actions, making decisions based on analysis and reasoning.
So it's like taking a big, messy problem and untangling it one piece at a time.
Exactly. There's this example of a project that was, like, way off track. The user engagement numbers were terrible.
Uh-oh.
But instead of freaking out, the project leader took a step back and started analyzing the data, really digging into it.
What do they do?
Well, first they segmented the data, to see if there were any patterns. Then they compared engagement across different user groups, behaviors, things like that.
Like a detective looking for clues.
And by going granular like that, they figured out that the problem was probably the user interface. It was too complex.
Interesting. So how did they test that idea?
They did a controlled experiment. They simplified the interface for one group of users and kept the old one for another group.
Ah, so they could compare the results.
Exactly. And guess what? The group with the simplified interface was way more engaged. So they knew they were on the right track.
That's such a good example of how breaking things down can lead to a solution. It's not always obvious at first.
Right. Okay, one more thing from this article, and it's a big one. Making decisions under pressure.
Oh, tell me about it. That's like everyday life.
Right. And the article talks about this triage approach. You got to quickly assess the situation, figure out what's most important, and then weigh the potential outcomes of each option.
So staying calm and focused, even when everything's crazy.
Exactly. They also say it's important to consult with others if you can, get different perspectives.
Always a good idea.
And no matter what, you got to learn from the outcome, whether you made the right call or not.
Every experience is a learning opportunity. Well, this is already giving me a lot to think about.
Oh, we're just getting started. In part 2, we'll explore even more critical thinking skills and how they can help you in all sorts of real-life situations.
I can't wait. This deep dive is already blowing my mind.
Welcome back. It's awesome to be diving deeper into critical thinking with you. In part 1, we dug into skills like evaluating arguments and tackling those complex problems. But there's another layer to all this.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's this next level about?
It's about looking inward, examining our own thinking processes.
So, not just how we think about the world, but how we think about our own thinking.
You got it. Understanding how emotions play a role in our decisions and recognizing those sneaky biases that we all carry around.
Oh, yeah. I think sometimes we forget that critical thinking isn't just about being super rational. Our feelings are definitely in the mix.
Totally. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in.
Wow.
Recognizing those moments where, maybe stress or anxiety is clouding our judgment.
Right, right. Being able to step back and say, okay, am I thinking clearly right now, or are my emotions getting in the way?
Exactly. And it's not just about our own emotions, but also being aware of how others might be feeling. Like in a team setting, recognizing if someone's frustration is blocking them from seeing a solution.
It's like being able to read the room, but also being able to read your own internal state.
I like that, reading the room. And all of this ties into self-reflection, which is huge for critical thinking. It's about regularly checking in with those beliefs, assumptions, and values we hold, making sure they're still working for us.
Oh, that's a good point. Like, are they aligned with our goals? Or are they actually holding us back?
Exactly. And it's about actively engaging with those beliefs, not just blindly accepting them because, well, that's how we've always thought.
Makes me think of that quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Powerful stuff.
Totally. It captures the spirit of critical thinking. Questioning, challenging, always being open to learning and growing.
Okay, so we're questioning our own biases, being open-minded. What's next?
This one's so important. Seeking out diverse perspectives. Especially these days, it's easy to get stuck in our own echo chambers.
Yeah, social media algorithms don't help with that.
Nope. So we got to make a conscious effort to break out of those bubbles. Read things you wouldn't normally read, talk to people who see the world differently than you do.
It's about getting uncomfortable, right? Challenging ourselves to consider ideas that might initially seem like, whoa, I don't know about that.
But that's where the magic happens. It's in those moments of, whoa, I never thought of it that way, that our thinking really expands.
Okay, so we're being open-minded, we're curious, we're seeking out different viewpoints. But with all this information overload, how do we know what to believe? How do we evaluate evidence effectively?
Great question. It's about becoming a super savvy consumer of information. You got to go beyond the headlines. Ask yourself, who conducted this study? What was their methodology?
So, like, don't just take things at face value, look under the hood.
Exactly. Be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true or super sensationalized. The best information often comes from reliable sources, think scientific journals, government agencies, reputable news organizations.
Okay, good to know. It's like having a checklist for evaluating information.
Right. And we also need to be aware of our own confirmation bias, that tendency to gravitate towards information that confirms what we already believe, even if it's not the most reliable.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally guilty of that.
We all are. One way to combat it is to actively seek out information that challenges our beliefs. Purposely read things you might disagree with.
So it's like training our brains to be more open and objective.
Yes. It's not about necessarily changing your mind, but expanding your understanding. Now let's talk about arguments. We encounter them everywhere, right? News, social media, conversations with
Oh,
friends.
yeah, arguments are everywhere these days.
Being able to break down an argument and see if it holds water is crucial for making smart decisions.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we approach an argument with a critical thinking lens?
First, you got to identify those premises, those underlying assumptions. Then ask yourself, what evidence supports those claims? Is it solid evidence? Is it relevant? Is there enough of it?
So it's like being a detective, looking for clues, but also being aware of red herrings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to watch out for misleading information, logical fallacies, anything that could throw you off track. Ask yourself, are they using emotional appeals that aren't really logical? Are there any holes in their reasoning?
This is making me realize that critical thinking is like a mental workout. It takes effort to really analyze things carefully.
It does. But it's worth it. It helps us separate fact from fiction, make more informed decisions.
Totally. It's about being discerning, not just accepting everything we hear. So we've talked about analyzing arguments, but what about coming up with new ideas?
That's where creative thinking comes in. It's about thinking outside the box, challenging the status quo, finding innovative solutions.
Okay, I like that. So it's not just about breaking things down, it's also about building things up, creating something new.
Exactly. There are techniques like brainstorming, mind mapping, lateral thinking.
Can you break those down for me?
Sure, brainstorming is all about generating tons of ideas, no judgment, just let them flow. Mind mapping is a visual way to organize thoughts and see connections. Lateral thinking is about approaching problems from unexpected angles. You know, finding those aha moments.
So it's about having a playful mindset, being open to different possibilities.
Yes, that playfulness can lead to breakthroughs that you never would have expected. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about those high-pressure situations where you have to make a tough decision fast.
Oh man, those are the worst. My brain freezes up. I make impulsive choices.
It happens. But critical thinking can actually help you stay calm under pressure and make better decisions.
How? Tell me your secrets.
First, just breathe. Seriously. Regulating your breathing can calm your nerves. Then focus on what's most important. What are your goals? What are the potential risks and benefits of each option?
So it's about creating that mental space, that structure, so you don't get swept away by emotions.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to reach out to others. Get a fresh perspective. Sometimes a trusted friend, mentor, or colleague can help you see something you might have missed.
But like a sounding board, bouncing ideas off someone else.
Yes, you don't have to go it alone. And once you've made a decision, commit to it. Don't second-guess yourself. Just learn from the outcome and move forward.
That's good advice. It's about making the best decision you can with the information you have at the time.
Exactly. It's not about always being right. It's about being able to adapt and learn. And speaking of adapting, let's talk about challenging assumptions.
Okay, assumptions. Those things we often take for granted without realizing it.
Right. And sometimes they're limiting us without us even knowing it. So we have to get good at asking ourselves, why do I believe this? Is there evidence to support it? Is there evidence that contradicts it?
It's like shining a light on those hidden beliefs that are shaping our decisions.
Exactly. And being willing to update those beliefs when we get new information. Did the article have an example about that? Something about a company expanding into a new market?
Oh, yeah. They almost launched a product that would have totally flopped.
Right. Because they assumed that what worked in their existing market would work in the new one.
And it turned out consumers in the new market had completely different preferences.
They did. So by questioning that assumption, they saved themselves a ton of trouble and were able to adapt their strategy.
That's a great reminder that sometimes our biggest blind spots are the things we assume to be true.
Totally. And questioning those assumptions is a core part of critical thinking. Okay, ready for one more big idea?
Hit me with it.
It's about communication. You can have all the brilliant insights in the world, but if you can't communicate them effectively, it won't matter much.
Right. It's like that saying, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it.
Exactly.
Mm.
Critical thinking isn't just about analyzing. It's about synthesizing, organizing your thoughts, and presenting them in a way that's clear, concise, engaging.
It's like telling a story with data, making those complex ideas come alive.
Yes. And finding ways to connect with your audience, whether you're writing, speaking, creating visuals, whatever it is. And this all ties into collaboration, which is essential for, well, pretty much everything.
Working together, bouncing ideas off each other, all that good stuff.
And doing it effectively,
Hmm.
being a good listener, understanding different perspectives, working towards shared goals, handling conflict constructively. All of that requires critical thinking skills.
So it's about bringing those critical thinking skills to the table, but also being respectful of others, recognizing that everyone has something to contribute.
Absolutely. And those collaboration skills, they're not just for the workplace. They're valuable in all aspects of life, families, communities, you name it.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. My brain is officially full.
We have. But there's one more part to this deep dive. In part 3, we'll explore how to cultivate a critical mindset and why it's so essential for living a fulfilling and impactful life.
I'm ready. This has been eye-opening. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Diving into critical thinking, it's really been like a total mind shift for me.
It's been awesome exploring this with you. We've covered so much, right? From
Yeah.
dissecting arguments to making decisions when the pressure's on.
For sure. And it feels like it's all connected somehow?
Oh, absolutely. There's a common thread through all these skills we've been talking about. It's about like actively participating in your own thinking, not just absorbing info, but really engaging with it, questioning things.
So it's not just what you think, but how you think.
You got it. And that's what we're going to unpack in this final part, how to cultivate that critical mindset.
Okay, I'm all ears. Where do we even start with that?
I think it begins with curiosity. Critical thinking, it's fueled by that desire to learn, to understand. Always asking questions, poking at assumptions, searching for new info.
It's like tapping into that kid-like sense of wonder, right? Always wanting to figure things out.
Exactly. And being open to new experiences, different perspectives, ways of thinking that might challenge your own.
Makes me think about all the times I've just dismissed an idea without really considering it. It's easy to get stuck in our own ways.
We all do it. But critical thinking, it requires a bit of humility, admitting we don't have all the answers, that we might even be wrong sometimes.
So being open to learning, to growing, having that growth mindset.
Yes, and being willing to actually change your mind when new evidence pops up. Critical thinking isn't about clinging to your beliefs no matter what. It's about letting your understanding evolve.
This makes me realize critical thinking isn't just about smarts, it's also about courage. The courage to challenge your own assumptions, step outside that comfort zone.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
And that courage, it leads to another crucial aspect, thinking independently.
Oh, huge one. Especially now, with information overload coming at us from every direction.
It's so easy to just go with the flow, follow the crowd, believe what everyone else seems to believe.
But critical thinking asks us to, step back from all that noise and really form our own opinions.
Precisely. It's about questioning authority, those underlying assumptions, forming judgments based on evidence and reason.
It's like having your own internal compass guiding you, even when it might lead you away from the popular opinion.
Love that. And that internal compass, it's guided by your values, what you hold to be true. Critical thinking is not just about being smart. It's about integrity, being authentic to yourself.
So it's not just a set of skills, it's a way of life, right?
Right.
Approaching everything with intention and purpose.
Beautifully said. And it's not just thinking, it's doing. Taking action in the world, using those critical thinking skills to make a difference.
So solving problems, creating opportunities, really making things better.
That's it. It could be starting a business, running for office, volunteering, or even just speaking up when you see something wrong. It's about using your critical thinking powers for good.
I love that. It's like critical thinking is a superpower we all have.
It really is. And I think that's the perfect note to wrap up our deep dive on. Critical thinking, it's about empowering yourself to live a more meaningful, fulfilling life, a life of impact.
Thank you so much for guiding me on this journey. I feel like I've got a whole new toolkit for approaching, everything.
It's been a joy exploring this with you. Just remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep asking those questions, challenging those assumptions, and keep learning and growing.
I will. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into critical thinking. Remember, a curious mind is a powerful mind.